have a gazillion things open right now because I have been really like feeling the mood reading, basically like each night or like whenever I have time to read, rather than continuing on in the book that I have actively open or any of the several options. I think, what am I in the mood for right now? And I pick up whatever that is, and it sometimes has been a brand new book. So I am about 75% of the way into The Forest of Dreams and Whispers, which is part of my Kindle Unlimited TBR, and this is an ebook that I'm reading on Kindle. I'm also about 85% of the way into Rain and Ruin, another romantasy book. I forgot to mention that about Forest of Dreams and Whispers, but another romantasy book that I'm also using Kindle Unlimited to read as an ebook. I'm about 50% of the way into The Sword of Kaigen, which is, not only am I using Kindle Unlimited and an ebook for that, it is also one of my 2024 priorities for the year. So that one I actually would really, really like to finish before the end of the month. I'm about 10% of the way into The Fall Is All There Is, and I'm about 20% of the way into Along the Razor's Edge. That one I'm pretty sure is going to be a DNF. The Fall Is All There Is most likely not going to be finished this year. Audiobook-wise, I am listening to Monstrous Nights, the second and final book in the Witch's Compendium of Monsters duology that has been coming out this year, and I think I'm about 40% of the way into that. And then the book that I have finished so far this month is Mixed Signals by B.K. Borson. This is a contemporary romance book set within the Love Light Farms universe. It is the third book in this series. I have already read the fourth one. Oh, the Love Light Farms is like small town contemporary romance. The first one is set around, and generally they're set around this Christmas tree farm. So actually, if you haven't read Love Light Farms, now would be a great time of the year to read it. And we are following the romance between Layla, the baker who runs the bake shop on the Christmas tree farm, who is the best friend of the Christmas tree farm owner, Stella. It's not important, you don't care. And we do get dual POV with her and her love interest, Caleb, who is a longtime regular customer at the bake shop, who very clearly has a crush on her in the other books, and Layla just doesn't see it. This is my least favorite book in the series. I think I just didn't really, it's not that I didn't like the two of them together. I did, I just like didn't really, I thought the conflict was kind of stupid when the time came. I generally have found these books to be kind of just okay. Like if you like small town elements where like the small town and the quirky characters within the small town like play a really big role, then this is definitely a series that is worth checking out. Like they're very cute. I just find like the romances themselves to be like just fine, like nothing really special. So overall, I would say that's like largely my experience with this series. On top of that, and not really the book's fault at all, I actually really disliked the audiobook experience in this one. So our hero, Caleb, is Mexican. I am pretty sure that he was born in the US, and I don't remember if it was his parents or his grandparents who emigrated from Mexico to the US. I don't remember, I'm not certain. He has no accent. However, the narrator chose to give his brother a very, very thick Mexican accent, like to his English, which didn't really make sense, in my opinion. In addition to that, there was a character, Charlie, who's actually the hero in the fourth book. Charlie is Stella's sister. He's not Mexican in any way, shape, or form. In this book, his first like entry into the book though is he happens to be at a party with Caleb and Caleb's like family. And so I think then perhaps the narrator got confused or wasn't given any additional info and also gave Charlie a really thick Mexican accent, and he's not Mexican at all. Additionally, I just like didn't love the way he voiced the main character, like the hero. I feel mean saying his voice was not it for me, but his voice was not it for me in this book. It was like listening to Urkel talk dirty sometimes in a really breathy way, which was just not, I didn't enjoy it. And then the narration for the heroine, Layla, was very, very breathy, Southern, like a, well, bless my stars, like really, really thick, really breathiness. But anyways, those are my feelings about Mixed Signals. Definitely my least favorite one in the series, and overall just like a really fine series. People do really, really love it. So don't take my solo opinion on this if you're thinking about checking it out. Again, I do think Love Light Farms would be, okay, I guess by the time you're seeing this, it's like January. So like maybe Christmas has already passed. But if you haven't read it yet, it still would be worth it. Like if you want, like if you didn't get the right Christmas romance over the holiday season and that wasn't Love Light Farms, maybe try giving Love Light Farms a read. It was fine. It is December 10th, and I have finished 2 books. So the book that I finished last night was Forest of Dreams and Whispers. This is a fantasy romance. I heard about it from the channel Carrie Can Read, and I did read the ebook with Kindle Unlimited. It was one of my higher priority KU books, so I get like intentional reading checkpoints for that. The only thing that I knew about it going into it was that it was Jude and Carden meets Emily and what was his name? Bamblebee from Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Like that was the mix that I was getting here. The synopsis talks about a human girl raised in fairy who is guard to this horrible Prince Hawthorne who she can't stand. It is supposed to be a gender swapped Sleeping Beauty, where obviously the prince is the one who falls asleep and his guard has to save him. I was in love with this book until about the 40% mark. Like up until around then, I was like, I'm gonna do a review where I'm like, if you need a Jude and Carden fix, like this is the book for you. And it just fell so downhill from there. So we have these 2 characters, they grow up together in fairy. There is a little bit of a bullying element a la Jude and Carden, but not like in their present past. It was more of like when they were really little, when they were preteens, there was some bullying because she was a human in fairy and he was mixed up in the wrong crowd. It is Emily meets Bramblebee in the fact that they pretend that they hate each other. A lot like Emily in the first book, in that book, where you're like, she's like, oh, he's my nemesis. But then actually as you read on, you're like, oh no, they're actually best friends. They're like the main person in each other's lives. That is the vibe between these 2 people, where they like, for some reason, keep insisting that they hate each other, even though there's really like no reason to. Like with Jude and Carden, there was reason to. In this one, like there's really not any reason for them to hate each other. Where this goes wrong though is the plot and pacing perspective, where it was actually nice to get a lot more of the romance, or the relationship building between them in the first part of the book. It made it a little bit slow because you're like, okay, like we're still like at like the 40% mark and this like curse hasn't kicked in yet. And nothing actually really changes. It's not like the dreaming element, her being the one to try to help break the curse. That isn't where their relationship starts to shift, which is how it's pitched. It's already shifted. And the plot is so underdeveloped and just like, it kind of feels like nothing happens. So it feels so dreadfully slow after that, because you're still having the same repetitive discussions between the 2 that felt really good in the first part of the book. Like it was great building, but we're still having those same conversations over and over again, and there's very little plot happening. I feel like even though this has been pitched, or we pitched this as the author getting the idea for a gender-swapped Sleeping Beauty, I feel like it actually started out as Jude and Carden fanfic. At the beginning, I did feel like it was like she took different things of it and put a different spin on it, or put it in a different plot and story. But the longer that it went on, the more like inserted tension and inserted thoughts and feelings that from that series, like the fear of fairy while it's still being her home, and this like hating dynamic, or like I wish I didn't care, I wish I didn't feel about you the way that I do. That wasn't warranted from this book, so it felt very scooped and inserted here just for reasons, without actually putting in the work to make that be the feeling. If you are looking for something to fill a Jude and Carden, or if you were disappointed by the amount of romance that was in Jude and Carden, and you either didn't like the bully element, or you could care if it was there or not there, and you're looking for something that is really, really just kind of It's not really popcorn candy either, because it's like not dramatic, but just like a simple casual read. Maybe pick this up. If you're bored at the 50% mark, just put it down. It's not worth it. So the next book that I finished was Rain and Ruin. This is another romantasy book that I used, or that I read through Kindle Unlimited, and I also get intentional reading points for that as well. So this one did really, really work for me. Overall, I was really happy with this book. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to continue reading onto it. I will just say that I think I maybe had like slightly too high of expectations in terms of like the world or political elements here. A few hundred years ago, there was a bit of a rebellion in this world that involved one particular type of the 6 magics. And so her particular country sort of like kicked those people out. And there's now like 2 side-by-side countries, and magic is sort of divided because of this. And the one country really, really fears the destruction of magic that the other one has. However, there's this like looming threat of the Republic that is against, or that opposes magic altogether. And Naime believes that if they can create a treaty with the other country and sort of bring the destruction magic back into the fold, it will help solve their problems from a magical perspective, as well as be able to fend off the Republic at large. So at the beginning of the book, Naime is working towards developing this treaty with this other country. However, it's a little bit challenging because she on her own doesn't have a lot of power. Her father is still the Sultan, but he is slowly losing his mind and memory to dementia that has a magical element in it, or involved in it. The council of viziers that are supposed to advise him all have like strong opinions of their own and don't want to bring destruction magic back into the fold. So she is really having to like fight and do things certain ways in order to try to advance this political agenda. Our love interest is the brother of the ruler of this second country, and he also really, really believes that a treaty would be helpful and beneficial. He wants to fend off the Republic as well, and he doesn't necessarily agree with the route that his brother is taking for their country at large. So he takes it upon himself to like answer her call, her request for a diplomat to work on this treaty, and we go from there. What my political expectations maybe were, or at least what I had been led to believe, was that the two kind of become friends in trying to work to make this treaty happen, and over time fall in love with each other. And I will say that they just like, I thought it was maybe going to be more like 2 smart people working together to like finagle things politically, whereas really she is more the political powerhouse, which is great. And he kind of like bumbles and stumbles his way through things a little bit because that's not how he thinks, and that's okay. He was raised to be a warrior, the head of their army, like general kind of a thing. So it's more her getting frustrated at him unknowingly wrinkling her plans, but it did lead to great discussions and tension between them. And then definitely from a very early time in the book, we are focusing on the interplay, the dynamic between our 2 leads. We do get both perspective here, so we are focusing on how the 2 of them interact. A lot of page time dedicated to them and developing their relationship. So if you're looking for romance in your fantasy, this is it. If you're looking for a sprinkling of romance, this is not it. It is much more about the relationship. I did really like the dynamic between our 2 main characters. I appreciated the way that they sort of like were drawn to each other, how their magic added into that. I also thought it was great that they both like cared for their countries first, in that for a large part of this book, it is a like forbidden type feeling where they both like acknowledge like, this isn't gonna happen. Like, let's have this like one stolen moment because I gotta be here and you gotta be there doing your thing. And like, they were both aware of the fact that they were each going to put their countries first. And it wasn't like, I'm gonna burn up my country and like throw the world to the flames in order to save you, girl. You know, like it wasn't that feeling at all. And I thought that was really refreshing, which made it even better when things go the route that they go in terms of how they manage things politically to achieve the ends that they want. I also appreciated, like, I remember at a point being like this political situation is not going to get solved by the end of this book. And of course it isn't, because it's the start in a series, which I had like, it's not that I forgot that, but I liked that we didn't try to like solve a large political problem in a very small amount of time. I really, really appreciated that. So from here on, each book in the series, as we go through like the world and fantasy element, each book is going to focus a different relationship pairing. and I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Actually, Lucy, my trouble is Christmas. I just don't understand it. Instead of feeling happy, I feel sort of let down.
I know how you feel about all this Christmas business, getting depressed and all that. It happens to me every year.
It actually cut. Oh my goodness. If you have ever wondered how coordinated of a person I am, I just took honey off of a shelf and hit myself in the face with it. It is the 13th of December. It's actually Friday the 13th, so very fitting to talk to you about Monstrous Nights, which I recently finished. I listened to this on audiobook through my library, specifically the Libby app, and this is the sequel and conclusion to the duology that is following up from Foul Days. I love when we get a duology in a single year. It feels so complete. Overall, I did really, really like this book. However, the fact that I had to listen to this on audiobook brought to like the forefront of my mind a little bit of a situation that I have noticed with some other series as well, is that I don't actually like to switch formats in the middle of the series. I read Foul Days as an ebook and then had to listen to the audiobook for Monstrous Nights, and I didn't gel with the audiobook. I don't know if it was because my expectation was different or like I was voicing the characters differently in my head. I do find that sometimes I notice a really big difference with like the way that I would voice a character and like the way that they're saying things, not accents, because this does actually lean into the narration leaned into the Eastern European inspiration here. The setup for our first book is our main character bargains away her shadow, which is the source of her magic as a witch, in order to escape a situation with a monstrous ex-boyfriend, and then gets tangled up into a mystery and conspiracy along with this copper guy Arson. In this book, we are dealing with obviously some of the fallout of the events from the first book. In particular, it's been about 6 months and things appear slightly off within both of the cities, but it turns out that there were some unforeseen side effects of the way that the magical problem was handled in the first book. And so our main character, Kasara, as well as Arson, are now having to deal with the magical fallout that unintentionally was created by the way that she handled the decision in the first book, or the way that she handled that situation in the first book, as well as some other people doing the things that they're doing. There was a smuggler that we didn't get, full circle on in the first book, and so we're dealing with a little bit of that problem in this one as well. While the first book was single POV with Kasara, we actually also additionally got Arson's perspective in this second book, and he is the cop that she had to team up with in the first book. This one does focus a lot more on like the investigation, I guess, of like how the two of them are going about figuring out what to do about the problem that they are in. Overall, I feel like Kasara's personality frustrated me a lot more in this book. She had this situation that involves some shadows and like her magic, and people kept being like, this is a problem. There's an element here that you don't have sorted, and she just like wouldn't acknowledge that she didn't have a handle on the situation, even though events kept conspiring or things kept happening to make it clear that she didn't have a handle on the situation. She also refused to accept help from anyone. And again, I don't feel like that was quite as prevalent in the first book, but in this book, she kind of discounts a lot of people. It did come full circle, that is addressed, but it was so much of her making these decisions, and yeah, I just feel like I didn't get on with Kasara quite as well in this one. I really liked Arson. I liked having his perspective. I liked having the inclusion of his POV throughout the book. There's a very, very minor subplot of a romance throughout this duology, and I really liked it overall. I actually feel like where we left the first book, and maybe with the synopsis with Monstrous Nights, maybe I feel like I was expecting more out of the romance, or maybe that was just like my hopes and dreams, or again, maybe I would have read it differently and lingered on sections a little bit differently if I was reading with my eyes as opposed to listening to the audio that just really keeps going, So overall, I would say that I did still really enjoy this. I think that my expectations were maybe out of sync. I feel like I had started to perhaps look back on Foul Days with more rose-colored glasses than than the actuality in the moment. I just rewatched like my clip when I talked about it in my July wrap-up, as well as the review that I did for it. And I remember actually feeling more positively towards Foul Days than I sound in those videos. Or I do also remember feeling like I was more excited like where the book left off. I was really excited about the prospect of the next book, and so maybe my expectations were setting this book up not to live up to the expectations that I had for it. Overall, I did still really enjoy it. I'm definitely gonna like let this linger, and if anything, I would want to reread this duology like back to back, the two books in the same format all the way through, to see if I have like a different impression of it. I feel like I say that a lot. I am actually gonna be including some rereads into my planning for next year, because I feel like I don't reread nearly as much as I used to, and I kind of miss that. And I think also I'm not good about taking notes in the moment, and I would like to revisit books or series in videos for content for you, for either like recapping or series reviews or whatever, and I don't have good notes to bank on, and I'm always like editing myself down in these clips. So even when I check back, I don't say all of the things that I'm thinking in the moment, because I had to, those extra clips are on the floor of the editing room, if you know what I mean, in order to make these videos succinct. I say as I look at twice the amount of time that I wanted to sit down and talk to you about this. I have no other audiobooks in the wings, unfortunately, so I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing audiobook wise, but ebook wise, I have mainly been listening or reading The Legacy of the Brightwash, and I'm so in love with it. I cannot wait to talk to you. I can't wait to finish it. I can't wait to talk more about that book with you as well, and we'll see what I end up getting finished here before the end of the year. I've got halfway through the month now, essentially. With a little bit of holiday times, that could either be more or less reading, you never know. It is the 18th of December, and I have finished one book, and that was a holiday romance, I think by Catherine Walsh. I usually read like maybe one Christmas romance a year. I don't think that I like them. I don't think that they work for me. I did not particularly enjoy this book. It has been a couple days since I finished reading it, and honestly, I have forgotten most of it. The setup here, or the premise, is one that I thought would be really fun. It starts off, it's like I think at this point, a 10-year history between these two people who both happen to live in Chicago but are originally from Ireland, and they wind up taking the exact same flight home for Christmas every single year. The first couple of years, it's obviously like coincidence, and after that it becomes intentional, up until this fateful year when a storm is threatening to prevent them from being able to get home for Christmas on time. So she decides that she's going to do everything that she can to get him home for Christmas. I was expecting and we're hoping for flashbacks to the plane rides, which we did get, but we didn't get nearly enough of that. We would get like one small scene, like one thing that happened. And I wanted more, almost in the style of People We Meet on Vacation, where you like a big part of the relationship development and the author selling me on this dynamic, like selling me on this acquaintances, friends to lovers. I want to feel that growth and tension over the years. So you got to show me over the years, and just not enough. It just didn't give me enough of that. Both our main character and the hero have kind of no personality. I saw some reviews that said that the main character, like our POV female lead heroine, whatever, was quirky. I didn't get that. I thought she was like really personalityless. I didn't feel the chemistry being built over the time period. I got a little bit of the chemistry in the now. They have like this like chance thing at the airport at the very beginning where they have to kiss because of mistletoe, and now our main character suddenly like, wait a second, was that a really good kiss, or am I going crazy? To be fair though, they did actually like talk about it, like the communication there was actually pretty good when you think about how that instigating factor could lead to a lot of miscommunication, a lot of like weird awkwardness. And actually it did for like a really brief period of time. I'm like slowly sinking because I don't want to like prop myself up anymore. It did, but for not a long period of time. So I actually liked that they communicated. I think it was maybe like the 85% mark. I was like convinced. I was like, oh wow, actually we're just not doing conflict. This is just communication between two personality-less, fill in the blank, Irish people who that really doesn't play in any other capacity other than that they have to get home. If this was an audio and it was Irish accents, it would have been better. Just because there would have been like that, like North American fetishism over accents, right? Like that's the reality there. The conflict then did catch me off guard because it came so late in the game. And it was really the only conflict left that could happen between these two characters. And I think when you get to this point, you'll probably be like, what else could go wrong here? Like, what's the only thing? I think that's another element that I thought it was going to be a little bit more funny. It actually, like, in the tagline is like, or like a lot of quotes that are used in the marketing for this was very like hilariously, uproariously funny. That it's like nothing funny happened. I don't really know why it was described as that. You could see they could have leaned into the travel mishaps in a very rom-com kind of way, and they actually didn't. I felt like that was almost a missed opportunity, even though I probably would have not liked that. One thing that is like a weird personal quirk is that when our main character is having like a career life crisis, which our main character is having in this book, one thing that I would like to see represented is characters who don't actually know what they want to do. Like, I feel like that never happens, and I would like to personally see that representation on the page. Characters always are like, no, I don't know what I do, but like secretly, actually, I want to open this like super specific, unique, small business that is like just so for me, like pottery, a la Happy Place? Is that what that one was called by Funny Story? And I would like to see some representation of people who don't actually have a plan, but still want a career change. Anyway, I am currently listening to the audiobook Sunbringer. This is the second book in the Fallen Gods trilogy. This is the sequel to Godkiller. So that is the audiobook that I'm listening to, and I'm about 45% of the way into that. The ebooks, I have been randomly reading Blood Mercy. I'm not very far into it at all, but I think I'm actually going to pivot because I've got a couple books open on ebook that are actually priorities for the year, and that includes Legacy of the Brightwash and Sword of Kaigen. So I'm gonna like scrounge up my will to allow these books to devastate me in the next couple weeks before the end of the year, so that I can get those 2 check marks and move on and into 2025. It is the 28th of December, so merry belated happy holidays, etc. to you for whatever you might or might not have celebrated this year. I have recently finished, like just sort of yesterday, although I listened to the epilogue right before or right after my shower, Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner, and this is the sequel and the follow-up to Godkiller, which I read earlier this year, or just in the fall actually, and really liked. I did do a full review for Godkiller, so I'll link that in the cards and the description box down below. Godkiller really was quite charming when you are following someone named Kissen, who is a Godkiller. The worship of gods within this country has been banned because of like some war that happened between all of like the wild gods and new gods and people. And she winds up getting grouped together with Anara, this little girl who is bound to a god, Skedegeth, the god of white lies, who we also get the POV from. So we get Kissen's perspective, Anara's perspective, little girl, Skedegeth, and then this other guy, Elo, who is a retired knight turned baker who is on a mission, one last mission for his king. And it's really cozy, it was fast moving, it had good action, it had great found family. And in this book, in the follow-up, we are less together as a unit for circumstances. And on top of that, even the elements here who are together, there is a sense of being apart because there is some discord going on between them in terms of what people want to do and what people think is the right thing to do. But I did really like it.
I can see why some people might find this falling into some of the common pitfalls that we do tend to see with second books in a trilogy. In this one, I feel like the second book did a good job of playing with the emotional fallout of events from the first book, which is just so common to say in a second book. There's a lot of discord between what people want to happen and what should happen. I feel like we became aware of a really significant problem towards the end of that first book. And in this one of our POV characters is in a situation that allows them to get more information about a additionally complicated problem. And so we're getting like information over here that's a little bit distressing, and we're getting a situation over here that is also really like stressful and tense. So I actually feel like this book, despite the fact that it is maybe not as hopping and like of a quick pace as the first book, and it still had lots of action, and I didn't feel like it dragged or was boring. I enjoyed getting more information about this world. We are focused a little bit more in on one particular city. This just has to come out at this point. I actually really enjoyed the conversation that we had about faith in this book, which is tough to do for me. I am a little bit particular about that. I was kept really, really riveted and constantly thinking about the way that I wanted different elements to go within the book, because there were so many dissenting opinions, or the way in which you could deal with various problems that are at hand. I think it did a good job of saying, like, we need to do this. It will have repercussions. Those repercussions are not great, but they might still have to happen. So overall, I was actually really, really satisfied with this book. You could definitely say that the found family element that was so positive, that I raved about in the first book, it is a little bit missing here, just because of the like physical separation between some of the characters. We need them to be the way that they are for plot and to learn information that we need to learn. And then even with the characters who are together, they're definitely like struggling with being on the same page. There was not the same found family cozy feel, but I think and hope, fingers crossed, that's what we're rolling back into in the third book. So I can understand that like there will always be some like, oh, my characters like aren't together, and I think that's just like something that happens in second books. Like it's just something that has to happen in second books. I don't have any audiobooks lined up next. We'll see what I have at the library. I have put some things that I have like on my mind for 2025. I put them on hold already at the library, but it might be a good time to go through and see if there's anything else that I would like to put on hold from the library as I sort of consolidate and firm up my 2025 plans, reading wise, or priorities anyway.
So much to the poltergeist. Trying to hold on to love, but it's frost and nice time. Much but a light from a falling sky. Apply to the forces above us like.
It's January 1st and the baby and dog are out with my partner for a walk, which means I have a moment to tell you about the final book that I finished this past year, oh my god, in 2024, and that was Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. This was one of my priority reads for the year. It was a TBR vet. I had a physical copy. I read this over the span of 5 months, which is outrageous. I was trying really, really hard to read it physically, and while I loved that goal for me, it did mean that I wasn't always prioritizing it. I didn't always have time to like physically sit down and read it. And then also because I'm often reading library books or like Kindle Unlimited books where I have like a little bit of like a time pressure, I wound up always prioritizing picking up the ebooks that I was working on over this one. So eventually I did wind up switching to the ebook copy that was available on Kindle Unlimited. So it worked out, and that made me able to get through like the last 50% of this book in a much quicker time than I read the first 50% of this book. I absolutely loved this book. Like I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of reading this. Whenever I was reading it, I was thoroughly engaged and caught up in the story. So this is set in a world that I'm gonna say feels like industrial flintlock kind of, and those might be opposing things. They have guns, they have trains, I don't think they have cars, but where rather than using like steam and coal as their sources of energy, they actually use their magical people within this realm who they require to be registered, and then they give them a specific job or task like running the trams, running the lights in buildings and on the streets, for ships, for transport, for they have healers as well. So all of the things that you would think like insert industrial advancements, they have found a way to use their what they call tainted people, and what the people who have magic call talent. So that's kind of like the world setup. Aesthetically, I now take this with a grain of salt because I haven't actually watched that much of this show, but aesthetically I was kind of picturing like Peaky Blinders-esque a little bit, where it's like a little bit like gritty and grimy city that is like has like some advancements but not a lot. I don't know if I could tell you off the top of my head when Peaky Blinders was set. I don't think that these are matching up technologically wise, but just like picture more that than like spunky fantasy world. I don't know, like it had like a very real, raw, grim image in my mind that was just so good. I mentioned in my top books of the year, because I gave this book a 5-star, and so it made it into my top rated books of the year video. Because of that, I mentioned in that video that no matter how many weeks had passed between me picking this book up, I was immediately back into the world, and I feel like the consistency and the distinctiveness of the world and our characters and just the setting itself was so distinct and clear and effectively written in the book that I had no trouble ever picking this up and just being immediately back into it. So supremely effective there. I also think from like a writing perspective, the pacing, which I feel like I'm going out on a little bit of a limb to talk about pacing in a book that took me 5 months to read, because that doesn't typically lead to a good ability to reflect on the pacing of a book. But what I can say is that the author used tension and action and outbursts so well. I feel like in between like big events, stuff was just sort of like slowly like building and building and building as one of our main characters would like get more information, and then we'd learn more information from this other character, and I'll talk about POVs in a second, but we would like get more information, and there would be stressful character interactions and stressful knowledge that you're learning and situations, and it would just like build and build and build and build till you felt like, oh my god, I'm gonna explode. And then you would like have this like huge action sequence that like suddenly everything was like really fast and stuff was happening, and it just like almost like popped that like or released that like pressure tension that was building. And the action didn't always necessarily even relate to the tension that was building, but it helped give you that sense of like a release in order to be able to continue on with building more tension when like the action kind of had passed. You had like a little refractory moment of ease before you then again continue to like pile back on. It was just so interestingly paced in that sense of like the tension and release that was just masterful. Honestly, it was so good and so effective. We are following a few different perspectives. The main one here, definitely our main character, is, I've been pronouncing it Teshue. Teshue is a regulation officer, so he works for the authority that is responsible for like controlling the magical people in this world. And he has a little bit of like a moral dilemma in that his son is a talented person who refused to register. So he actually like stood back and allowed his son to be like taken off, like carted off to where they call the Rift, which is where all of the unregistered magical users have to stay. And over the course of this book, or at the beginning of the book, he winds up finding the body of a dead child. So content warnings for some really tough stuff here involving children.
They find a body washed up on the river who has been mutilated, and he feels like nobody cares, but at the same time there's political stuff going on around him. He is dealing with like this really tense situation with his son who is locked up. There is a woman whose perspective we get as well, Stella, and he has a really big crush on her. She's a neighbor, but now she's one of his cases, so there's a little bit of that like power dynamic dilemma that he doesn't feel like he can act on because of this. And he garners the attention of some political movers and shakers. He happens to be a war hero. We get the occasional perspective of this kind of fancy, not exactly noble woman, but like a woman of the gentry, a wealthy woman, one of those political movers and shakers, as she tries to draw him into the situation. We get occasionally, snippets from Jason, Teshue's son, in the Rift, as well as his partner. On that note, it is very casually queer. It's not clear if the world is casually queer or if we're just in the perspectives of characters who are being introduced as very casually queer. But this book was so good, and if our tastes at all align, you should pick up this book. It's so good. I'm sure that I have missed some things here. It is, if I didn't make it clear, it is grimdark. It is a very grim and dreary world, surprisingly romantic. Caught me off guard a little bit. I was not expecting that. And there was I think an author's note that I came across that talked about wanting to show how people still seek out love even in really like crappy situations, and what that would look like. It was so beautiful in that sense. It was very distressing because I think that you will figure out, the reader, like I think you're gonna have like a much better sense of what's going on than Teshue is, because you don't have 19 years of, I don't want to say brainwashing, what's the right word, propaganda, so you'll be able to get a sense of what the situation is a lot more clearly than Teshue is. So be prepared for some hard stuff in that element. But overall, like such a freaking good book. This was so good. I loved it so much. New favorite. Can't wait to pick up the second book at some point next year. Not too far into next year. Oh my God, next year. This year. Let's leave it there for December, and I will see you hopefully shortly with my January wrap up, as well as the end of the year content that should be closing up by the time you are seeing this. I hope you had a great holiday season and that your January is not super dreary. Let me know one of the best books that you finished out your year with, so something that you read in the final quarter of last year, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.